Okay, we're going to be working on lesson 7.2 today, and we're going to work on multiplying powers with the same base. Okay, so when I'm talking about the same base, like these are all nines. This is 0.5 and 0.5, so the big number has to be the same. Okay, all right, so when multiplying powers with the same base, you are going to add the exponents. All right, add the exponents. So now the first example here says, what is each expression written using the base only once? So basically, we're just going to clean this up and put it together. Okay, so as long as you have the same base, so in this case, 8s, you can go ahead and add up the exponents. That's going to be our rule. So if you have the same base, add the exponents. So in this case here, we would get 8, add up 3 plus 6, and get 9. Oops. So we would have 8 to the 9th. Now, for right now, I'm okay with you leaving it like this on these first few problems, because 8 to the 9th, we would just put it in our calculator and find out what that equals. All right, so let's go to the next one here. Okay, so now on this guy, again, we have to have the same base, so we have 0.5. So I've got 0.5. And then when I'm looking at this, I'm going to add up the exponents. So I'm going to add them up. And when I do that, I end up with negative 3 plus 8 is negative 11. Negative 11. Okay, and normally we would not leave a negative exponent, right? The negative exponent, think what that means. It means that I would actually drop it and say 1 over 0.5 to the 11th power, okay? However, since it said just write the base with one exponent, that's good. That's a fine answer. Just note that these are the same thing, and we would never leave a decimal in a fraction form anyway, so we would have to go ahead and clean that up. So for right now, this will be accepted. All right, so the next one here. Okay, we've got the same bases. So if we look here, we've got a 9, a 9, 9. So we've got the same base, so we know the base is 9. And then again, we're just going to add up our exponents when we are multiplying. So when we multiply, add up the exponents. So negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1, plus 6 will be 5. So you would have 9 to the 5th power here. All right, let's go ahead and move down. So the directions here says, what is the simplified form of each expression? Okay. They're asking us to simplify. So we're just going to basically clean it up. Now, the big numbers out front, the 4 and the 9, I'm not teaching anything new about that. So you're still going to tell me that 4 times 9 is 36. So those rules are not any different than what they've always been. Now, we look at the base. We have x to the 5th and x to the negative 12th. I can add them up because I have x's. So I know my base here is x. And then again, we're going to add 5 and negative 12, and that's going to give me negative 7. Now, we aren't going to leave things with negative exponent. Once they ask us to simplify, we're going to need to go ahead and clean it up. So in this case, the 36 stays on top because it has a positive 1 exponent, right? So it doesn't move. And then the x to the negative 7 will actually drop down because it's a negative exponent, and we'll end up with 36 divided by x to the 7th. And that's going to be your final answer. Okay. All right, let's take a look here at B. So again, I am not teaching you anything new about the front numbers. So 2 times 9 times 3, okay, will be 54. So I have 54. Okay, now if I'm looking here, again, I got to put together the same bases. Okay, so I'm going to put the A's together, keeping in mind that there is a 1 on that guy. So I've got a to the 3rd. Right? 1 plus 2 is going to be a to the 3rd. Now, this poor guy right here, he doesn't have any other bases that match up, so you're just going to write him down as b to the 4th, and that's going to be your final answer. Okay? All right, I want you to go ahead and pause the video and try C on your own. Okay, so you should have taken 5 times 3 and got 15. And then since we have all the same variables, so all x's are the same base, we're going to go ahead and add them up. So I have 4 plus 9, and then remember there is a 1 there. So 4 plus 9 is 13, plus 1 is 14. So I have x to the 14th should have been your answer. Okay, so again, combine like terms. We're going to multiply those front numbers. So negative 4 times 7 times 2. All right, and so we're going to get negative 56. Okay, put together the bases that are the same. So I'm putting c to the third and c to the negative 2. So when I add those up, that's going to give me 1c or just c. And then if I'm looking at this guy right here, d squared doesn't have anybody else. So we're going to have d squared as an answer there. Okay. All right. So looking at this guy, the only number out front is a 12, so I've got a 12. All right, now I'm going to put together my j's. So I have 2 here and 1 here. So that's going to give me j to the third. Now this k right here, this guy, he's a negative, so he's actually going to have to drop down. Okay, so when you do that, you're going to put him on the bottom and have k squared on the bottom. And that's your answer. So again, we need all our exponents to be positive. Okay, why don't you take a second, pause this video, and try F on your own. Okay, so you should have went ahead and took 4 times 6 and got 24. Anything to the 0 power here becomes a 1, so it's like it's not even there. And in fact, you could just cross them off. You don't even have to kind of worry about them. Anything to the 0 power is going to be equal to 1. Now, the c to the negative 3, though, that is going to have to drop to the bottom because it was negative. So you should get 24. Oops, how about, we'll put a 3 there instead. So 24 divided by c to the third, and that's your answer. Okay. All right, so now we got to look at, we know what to do if I give you something like 9 squared. You know that that would be 9 times 9 or 81, okay? Well, now what I'm going to teach you is what do we do when we have a fraction here? So before, all we've done is work with whole numbers, and now we're going to look at the fraction. Okay, so when we're looking at the fraction, this guy right here is your total parts. How many total parts do I need? So in this case, I need 4. So what that is saying is you're going to take a number and multiply it 4 times, but it has to be the same number. Okay? This guy up top here is how many you will use. How many you're going to use. So what I have to do is come up with what times what times what times what is going to get me 81. That's our first step. Okay, so if we start thinking, like 3 times 3 is 9. 9 and 9 would be 81. So in here, I'm going to have 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Okay, now that's how many total parts I have. I have 3 4s. The top number, again, tells you how many you're going to use. I am going to use one of them. So since I'm only using one of them, your answer, in this case, is 3. Okay, all right, let's try that again. Okay, so we've got 16. Again, we've got 4 parts, because this tells us how many parts. So we have 4 parts. So what times what times what times what gets us 16. So if you kind of start thinking about it, 4 times 4 would be 16, but I need 4 of them. So how about 2 times 2? Let's try that. So 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 4 is 16. That looks good. Now, again, this top number tells me how many I'm going to use. So I'm going to use 3 of them. So I'm using 3 of them. Okay, so 2 times 2 is 4. Times 2 is 8. So my answer here is 8. Okay. All right, so again, how many parts do we have? We've got 3 parts. So what times what times what can get us 27? It has to be the same number. So 3 times 3 times 3 would get us 27. And then again, how many parts am I using? I'm going to use 2 of them. So I'm using 2 of them. So 3 times 3 is 9. All right, I want you to take a second, go ahead and pause the video and see what you come up with on this one. Okay, so if I'm looking at this guy, it says there are 2 parts. Okay, so there are 2 parts. So what times what can get us 64? Hopefully you're coming up with 8 times 8. And then again, this top number right here tells me how many I'm going to use. So I'm only going to use one of them. So my answer here should be 8. Okay, now, quick side note here. Anything to the 1/2 is the same thing as this guy. Okay, so if it says 64 to the 1/2, that's the same thing as just taking the square root of 64. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and flip over to the next page here. All right, so now we're kind of doing the same thing here, except for see how that top number is bigger, okay? So you're still looking for how many parts do we have? We're still looking for 2 parts. So what times what gets us 25? So hopefully the 5 times 5 is popping into your head right now. Now this tells us how many parts we're actually going to use. So in this case, it says we actually are going to use 3 of them. So we're going to actually add on a third part there, okay? So we have, like I said, 2 total parts, but this is how many of them we're going to use. We're going to use 1, 2, 3. So now when you multiply 5 times 5 times 5, you would end up with 125. Okay. All right, so let's look at it again. Again, there are 4 parts. Okay, that's what the bottom number is saying, 4 parts. Okay, so what times what times what times what will get us 16. Hopefully you're starting to think of 2s. 2 times 2 is 4. Another 2 times 2 is 4. So 4 times 4 is 16. And then again, that top number there is telling us, right here, 5. We have to use 5 of them. We only have 4 of them down, so we need to add in 1 more 2. So then I'm going to take 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, get 16, and then multiply by that last 2 and get 32. Okay. All right, moving on down. Okay, still simplifying, but now we're going to look at it in terms of fractions. Now, again, it doesn't change what you do to the front number there, okay? So those front big numbers, you're still just going to take 2 times 2 and get 4. C. Now, we just learned the rule on the front side. When you multiply, you add your exponents. I don't care if they're fractions or not. You're going to add the exponents. So you're going to take 3/5 plus 1/5. Well, in this case, we already have common denominator. So you're just going to get 4/5. So it's going to be 4 times c to the 4/5. Okay. All right. So if we're looking at this guy, okay, remember, they're just ones out front here, so you don't need to write a 1 there, but 1 times 1 will be 1. We've got the same base, so n, and now we're going to add them up. So we've already got a common denominator of 3. 1 plus 4 is 5, so I got 5/3, n to the 5/3 as my answer. Okay, again, we're just adding those 2 up. All right, so now we come down here. It gets a little more complex. It doesn't change our rules, though. We are still going to combine things that have the same base. So we're going to look at the B's and put those together. And then we're going to look at the C's and put those together. Okay? So on my B's here, I'm going to have B. Now, I've got to add 2/3 and 4/9. You are going to have to come up with a common denominator here of 9s. Okay? I'm going to erase this real quick. Just give us a little more room. So I multiply by 3 here and get 6/9 plus 4/9. So you've got 10/9. So I've got B to the 10/9. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my C. C, I'm going to take 2/5 plus 9/10. Again, common denominator. We need the 10s on the bottom. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 and get 4. So 4 plus 9 is 13/10. And there's your answer. Okay. All right, I want you to take a second. I want you to pause D and try it on your own, see what you come up with. Okay, so what a lot of kiddos here like to do is they like to not put together all of your front numbers. So a lot of people will not put the 2, the 3, and the 5 together. You still need to multiply all the big outside numbers together. So a lot of people will only say like 2A and then 15B. That's not the case. You need to go ahead and multiply all 3 parts. So 2 times 3 is 6, times 5 is 30. So you should have got 30. Now put together your A's. Okay, so I've got 2/3 and 1/3, which would be 3/3. Okay, and so 3/3, will turn into a 1. I don't care if you put a 1 there or not, that's up to you. Now we're going to put together your B's. So we've got 1/4 and 1/2. So when you add those up, you should have got B to the 3/4. And that is the answer you should have. That concludes our notes for lesson 7-2.